Managing multiple clients or large websites? Automate your SEO with Ali AI. Start your free trial now.
Taylor Swift is a link builder. There were rumors that she would get engaged. Our client said, let's give them a free wedding venue. And then we got them 50 links. That's digital PR.
Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
Everyone, welcome to the AI panel. Very excited for you all to be joining us today. We have a panel of amazing experts with very, very different perspective. We have a paid search individual, we have a generalist SEO, we have an in-house SEO who focuses on SaaS, and then myself as an enterprise SEO. We are going to have four main discussion points, and within each of those discussion points, there we go, still learning to speak this morning, we will have audience questions. So as I announce these discussion points, feel free to start thinking of what you want to ask. We're going to have wonderful Ruth in the blue sweater running around with mics. Please do wait for Ruth to come up to you with a microphone if you have a question, just so everyone in the room as well as the video can hear that question. Let's go ahead and kick off. My name is Travis Tallent. I'm the VP of SEO at Brain Labs. I lead our SEO and CRO team, which is about 90 people globally. We work with some of the world's biggest brands, Capital One, Adidas, and I am very excited to be discussing AI because we have used automation and technology at Brain Labs for many, many years, and have been using machine learning for a long time as well. Then, of course, generative AI launched 2 years ago, November of 2022, in a big way when ChatGPT came out. And now there is a very different world where everyday public is using it. And our clients, our bosses are starting to ask more and more questions about AI. I will pass it over to Crystal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Carter. I am the head of SEO communications for Wix Studio. And in my role, I get to do a lot of enterprise SEO projects. I get to speak to agency owners, SEOs, users about how they're using AI. And I get to see how we roll out AI-powered tools across our SaaS platforms. So we have Wix Classic, we have Wix Studio, and we have some management tools that we have available within our framework as well. And we've been doing lots of AI integrations with OpenAI, with Google, and with other tools as well. So I'm happy to share those insights with everyone here.
Thank you. Akash.
Hey, I'm Akash J. Hashmi. Nice to meet everyone. I'm an SEO multi-tool who's working in agency. Hey, you can't laugh at that. It's a really good one. So I'm working agency side as an organic media manager. I've got about 6 to 7 years of sort of pure SEO behind me, including some of the weird sort of grey hat stuff that if you want to ask me about, feel free. And on top of that, I've sort of got a background in pure journalism. Before that, in forensic chemistry. So super varied background, but I've kind of stuck around in SEO for a while now. So I think I like it here.
Amazing. Thanks, Cash. Omar.
Excellent. Hi, guys. My name is Omar. I am a paid search account director, so the odd one out. But I currently work at a company called Assembly Global, who are Europe's leading AI agency in the paid search sphere, according to Google. So not my words. But in my current role, I look after all the activity, paid search activity for a company called Estee Lauder across Europe, the Middle East, India, but not the UK. So I don't get discounts.
Amazing. So the four main themes of today, number one is going to be AI's impact on SEO strategies. Number two is search engines and AI integration. Number three is AI tools and use cases. And number four is SEO talent versus AI. Is it a complement or a competition? So let's go ahead and start with AI's impact on SEO strategies. AI is here. If you saw my talk yesterday, I said very confidently, we are in the chaos phase of Satir's change model, where we don't really know how AI is going to impact the world in a much broader way. but it is here. And we've heard of various ways people use generative AI. Sometimes that is simple things like creating meta descriptions or full content itself. So this begs the question, how do you balance human creativity with AI-generated content? Let's go ahead and start with Akash.
Yeah, cool. So I think everybody draws their own lines, right, on what you think is going to be okay with use of creativity and using AI outputs. For myself, I love it as a tool to just speed up the menial tasks, things like hundreds of meta descriptions, things that aren't going to be high risk but are going to save a lot of time on my side. And then it gives me more hours, obviously, to work on the more creative side of things, the ideation side of things, more critical thinking for clients, trying to get into the nitty-gritty of what the problem is or trying to figure out the issue. But again, I've used it for creative stuff too. I love it in creative ideation, helping me come up with ideas, coming up with a content calendar for specific keywords. So yeah, I love it as a helpful tool, but I think right now it's just not quite there to be using direct outputs without significant involvement, i.e. coming up with a good tone of voice, putting filters over the LLM to make sure it's giving you an output that's very similar to your original copywriting team would have been.
Amazing. Yeah, fantastic points there. Crystal.
Yeah, I think the quality point is really important. I've quoted this a few times at a few talks that I've been at, but PricewaterhouseCoopers put out a fantastic report on the impact of AI currently and in the future, and they had this great chart about how it's all panning out over the future. And they were saying that right now the biggest thing you can get is efficiencies, like the things that you're talking about there, and it will get better. It will get better at customization, creativity in a few years, but at the moment efficiencies are really important. As in that, guys, I think that when we're trying to balance human elements and AI, I find that it's a really great tool for helping get differentiation from some of that qualitative data that we have within our midst. So we get client reviews, we get we have interviews with users, we have interviews with team members, we have interviews with lots of different things, and you can use LLMs, you can use these tools to help you quantify that data, to help you figure out how many times they were talking about one particular topic, what the sentiment was. You can take I've done this before. You can take 1,000 questions that people have sent to you and said, what are the top 10 questions that people are asking from this data set that people are sending you, and it can help you get incredible efficiencies there. It also means that it helps you to take that primary source data to help drive differentiation. And I think that in SEO, that's always been key. There's always been content mills. There's always been people who are turning out lots and lots of data at scale, or lots and lots of content at scale. But in the AI era, differentiation is key. So if you can use LLMs to help you get differentiation with that primary source data, like your qualitative interviews, like the qualitative responses from surveys, et cetera, then that will help you get some incredible efficiencies and help you bring a human element into what you're doing.
Omar.
Excellent. I think it's always important to remember when it comes to AI in the current world is people there's this sort of conception about it sort of solving all of our problems, but in reality, it's just a tool to get us what we need. And at the end of the day, AI is all about, well, in my perspective, accessibility and making things more accessible. So if you have a vision in your head, AI is designed to help you achieve that vision. So it should never be, so as sort of mentioned earlier, the inputs are so valuable because that's going to define the outputs that you receive. So if you're writing content, just telling it to do something, you're probably not going to get something of value, but it's maybe a lot better at rewriting content. And the reason it does that is because there's so much input in there, and it could just sort of tidy it up. It could just sort of make the quality more accessible rather than anything else. Again, it's all about, we are sort of the GPS almost, while AI is probably more of the car to get us to where we need to do. And especially from a search perspective as well, that's sort of been the key theme that we've seen, just inputting as many signals as possible. That gets you the output you need. At the moment, just pure generative AI, at this point in time, we haven't really necessarily seen the results of quality that we would get from something that's fully created by a human being. I think at this point in time, that's sort of the formula.
Yeah, fantastic points. Really the undertones of efficiency with this big question mark around quality. Just to close this out, how I kind of view this is generative AI is not a cure-all. It absolutely has its place to help with certain things, but there are lots of other tools, lots of other technology that can actually be a lot better in helping deliver that type of quality. So when we think of things like creating a content quality checker, comparing that content against brand guidelines or an SEO checklist, generative AI is not a good use case for that. But using other technology is. So it's really about understanding the bounds and limits of that, and then piecemealing which tools are ultimately best suited to serve that need. So it sounds like we've all tested this in some ways. What are the drawbacks that you've ultimately seen in using Gen AI? Let's go ahead and start with Omar.
Excellent, thank you. I think there's, from a work perspective, one main thing that we've seen is that there's two major points, two major flags. The first one is client sensitivity data. Like anything you input into a language, so into any sort of learning model, can be utilized by the model itself and outputs for other people. So you really need to be careful about what you input in there, because that can then be utilized against sort of your, not your knowledge, you agree to it, but you just need to be really conscious about the key things you put in. The second thing is that we, on paid search, we use something called Performance Max. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's about sort of matching images with advertising space. Gen AI right now is creating images for us to use and content for us to use, but something we've been very conscious of is, well, it's not really giving us the best output, not because it can't deliver the best output, but because, one, there's so much limitations about what you can ask for. For example, you can't, Google will never let you automatically generate a face. And a face is super important for like that advertising sphere because it's a key hook. So you can't do that. Another thing is that it doesn't fully understand what your product is. So if you're asking it, for example, to give you a bottle of perfume for a specific client, it won't do that because it doesn't really know what it is. So it can give you something generic and it can give you something better than nothing. But that's the key drawback, is that it's never going to be, at this point in time, just due to all the legal limitations, it can't give you something as good as something that you can do yourself. It can help you edit that, it can help you redefine that, but create it from scratch is a huge limitation.
Yeah, Crystal.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the case. I remember trying to generate an image of a tennis court or a tennis ball on grass, and I've spent like 20 minutes arguing with an LLM, trying to get Dolly to do this for me, and it was just a mess. And then I just went to Unsplash, and there it was. So I think that, yeah, you have to figure out which one is the tool that you need. So yeah, I think that's. And going along with that, I think one of the challenges with generative AI, particularly with this transition into using generative AI so consistently as a tool, is trying to figure out like when is the time to invest in investing in AI, and when is the time to sort of use a different tool. Because as you said, you've been using automation, you've been using various different things. I had somebody who was like, "Oh, can I get it to do this?" I was like, "You could just do a crawl for that. There's a crawl for that thing that you needed to do." So sometimes there are things to do that, but I think also. I mentioned this before, but I think that also differentiation. I'm going to come back to this on this. If lots of people are using the same tools and lots of people are using the same prompts and lots of people are using the same way to generate content, for instance, then we're going to have a lot of very, very similar content, both similar in format and similar in tone and things like that. I think we've all started to see that across LinkedIn comments and Twitter comments and things, or people say, "Oh, and what are your key?" And you're just a bot. You just botted this, so I'm not going to reply to you. But good luck. And so I think when you see that, it's really, really important to keep the differentiation as a point for you when you're creating your content. And when you're thinking about your content strategy, because I think that we are in a space where everyone is going to need to use AI in order to keep pace with the scale of content and the incredible gains that you can get in terms of efficiency and competitors. But the downside is potentially things that look really samey, things that look like somebody just churned that out with an LLM, and it kind of feels cold. So if you're not spending the time curating it, spending the time making sure that you inject your own additional nuance into it, and using it to support your human-led content and ideas, then differentiation could see a lack of differentiation could see you suffer in search terms, because it will look the same as other content on the SERP, and so why would Google rank you? So that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. Cash.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I think that's covered a lot of it, but I love it, like I said, for ideation, right? And I love using it in content, but as soon as you're using an LLM output as your content machine, you're basically opening yourself to be usurped by people who have content that is very specific, very differentiated. And beyond that, it's genuine and it's useful for people. And at the end of the day, Google is ranking sites. Well, we know there's 100,000 and a million different little signals that we're looking at. But at the end of the day, it's about how useful your content is. Is this piece of content giving the user the answers they need? Is the user getting to the product that they want to? And if you're using an LLM, you've basically just gone to the same freelancer as every other person doing the same thing that you're doing, right? If I give you a practical example, say if all of a sudden I've been struck with some genius and I'm going to start selling candles on Etsy because that's going to be the newest thing, right? All of a sudden I want to make some content around these candles. I've got a brand new lemon candle. And I asked ChatGPT to write me a description about this and say, hey, can you SEO optimize it? Whatever that means to ChatGPT. Turns out everyone else who has Etsy with a candle selling business has also put that exact same description in there. So at the end of the day, you're completely shooting yourself in the foot by just not putting anything about your product in there. You're borrowing it from the internet. So without any intervention, without actually changing that content, you're basically just copying and pasting. So I really, really do recommend, make it custom, use it for that ideation. Again, like if I've got 10 queries that I think are going to be super popular, or if I look at my keyword data and see that these are popular queries, I merge that with some people always ask questions as well and say, hey, ChatGPT, give me 10 titles for some long form pieces or some blogs that might be useful for audiences interested in these topics. All of a sudden, I've got 10 pieces that I can now change the titles of, do what I want with, and then write from scratch or with a bit of help from some LLM or ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever one you prefer. So yeah, great for ideation, but let's stop with the copy paste because it's not going to help anyone really.
Yeah. From my perspective, managing a team, the biggest drawback I see with generative AI is how confident its responses are. You can say, write a title tag, keep it, below 60 characters, and it'll populate a title tag that's 70 characters. And when you're managing a team and without really coaching that team on be skeptical of this, always make sure that you are using this in a wise way and not just trusting it blindly. The biggest drawback I found is governance of all of that. It is quite difficult. That's it for theme 1. I would love to turn it to the audience and answer any questions you have as it relates to AI's impact on SEO strategies. Yeah, right here.
I found that really interesting, thanks. One question I did have is you talked about AI being a tool to help things like expediting processes in your team, but with a kind of underlying I don't trust AI situation at the moment, do you find you're spending a lot of time checking the outputs and that's causing increases to your team's workloads? And how are you combating that?
So I think I talked about the time to invest in AI. One of the things that's really useful is that the best things to spend your time doing AI are things that you've already systemized or that you already have a system for. So if you already have a checklist, like an SEO checklist that you use for your team, or you already have a workflow that you use for your team, it's easier to reverse engineer that to improve the quality of your output. So you can say, this is my SEO checklist. You can, because that's the other thing you have to remember. We say ChatGPT, but everyone's ChatGPT and even a particular chat is kind of trained uniquely. So you can train the set. You can say, this is my SEO checklist. This is the criteria that I have for a good blog. right? And you can train it, and then you can say, can you tell me can you summarize this checklist, or can you summarize this criteria? And they'll say, oh, it's this, and this. You go, great. Now, can you assess this blog, right? And you make sure that it's one that you've already done, that you know, like this is good and this is not good. And then you can find out whether or not it meets the same scale. And so there's different quality assessment things that you can do to make sure that the outputs that you get for a particular training model work really well. So that step is really, really important. It's just like if you were to write code and then you put the code on your website and then you have to validate the code. Similarly, you need to validate the responses from ChatGPT. Now, if you're planning to do something one time, maybe it's worth doing it with ChatGPT, maybe it's not. If you're planning to do this for multiple workflows, like something that you do every day, something that you do really regularly, like I was saying, like we do webinars really regularly. We ask people to ask questions, and we have an internal ChatGPT, by the way, that is completely protected, et cetera. And so when I'm trying to figure out like all this qualitative data, I'll take the questions and I'll say, can you pull out the common themes from these 2,000 questions that I've had from people? And I can pull out the common themes, and it'll take 3 minutes, right? And if I were trying to do that manually, it would take forever, right? And so that's something that I do regularly, and that's a workflow that I know. So and I can go and I can assess the questions, et cetera. So make sure that it's something that you understand, a workflow that you understand, that you're not just like, that's not completely new to you, and something that you can validate before you start rolling it out to the rest of your team. So treat it like you would any kind of code implementation, like test it, validate it, check it again, and then it'll make it more efficient when you're rolling it out.
Just to briefly add to that, like the nuance that you talk about within that validation is so important, because again, another practical example, right? If it's taking you 2.5 hours or 3 hours to get a piece of content to your tone of voice, to the place that you want it to be, then it's probably a bit too much time, because if it's going to take 3.5 to 4 hours for someone to write it from scratch, you're probably going to want to go that route. But it depends on the task, right? So that's with content, but with each and every task that you're doing, whether that's within SEO, PPC, wherever that is in marketing, it's up to you to draw that line as to, okay, how much effort into validation do I want to put, rather than just doing it manually.
Speak about this holistically. Studies have come out to show people who get robo vacuums in their home, you would think, oh, they spend less time doing chores. There's a robot vacuuming for them. And the reality is those people spend the same amount of time doing chores as everyone else, but they're not vacuuming their floor. They're able to clean other things. So I would think about it in that way. It's absolutely going to be something that, especially in the short run, is going to be a time suck. But if it's something you do on a recurring basis, you have a checklist for, it could absolutely be worth exploring. Just for time's sake, I would love to know if there's one other question for this, and then if not, we'll move on to theme 2. Any other questions for AI's impact on SEO strategy? Yeah, we'll go. You look very eager, so.
Hi, everyone. My question is about Gemini, actually. I don't know if you use one. So, as we know, ChatGPT is owned by Microsoft, so it scraps from Bing and returns to Bing, while Gemini is owned by Google. So the question is, have you noticed, or have you come across the content generated in Gemini being kind of deprioritized or going lower in search result? Because Google obviously knows that you've generated that content there.
Interesting.
I've not seen that just yet, and I've not seen any studies around that. But I think that would be an interesting one to do.
Nothing from my end. That's a really interesting one, though.
No, I was going to say, if I think historically we know this, like if Google has the information, chances are they are probably down the line going to use it. So yeah, I've not seen anything right now, but obviously a really, really useful one to keep an eye on, because again, we've seen it with GA, we've seen it with a bunch of different platforms. What Google says isn't necessarily what they're going to be doing behind the scene, as we've seen with the DOJ stuff, as we've seen with the court rulings recently and the leaked documents. So yeah, just really important to listen to the line that's being towed by them. But yeah, keep an eye on that stuff, and I'm sure there will be stuff coming out by a lot of different bodies on this, because super interesting and a really good question as well, to be honest.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So moving on to discussion 2, search engines and AI integration. Obviously, Google has now launched AI overviews, also known as AIOs, rather haphazardly. I don't know if anyone saw the bad PR around that, but Google was saying you can eat rocks and put glue on pizza to prevent cheese from falling off. And they received plenty of flack from this. We've also seen other SEO search engines, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and there are many vocal voices in the SEO community that those are going to be the death of Google and actually take meaningful market share. We have yet to see that though. In any data, Perplexity, SearchGPT has not taken any market share from Google yet. But I have noticed AIOs more recently have been useful, and I don't need to click through on a website. So I want to ask the panelists here: is AI search beneficial, and what are the use cases you ultimately see for it?
I think it's an interesting one. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a paid perspective, because we are in a weird way at an advantage and at a disadvantage in the SERP, because obviously we rank higher, but that's because we pay for it. And because we pay for it, there's an element of skepticism that comes from a lot of people, including myself, and I've been working in this field for God knows how long. But it's just natural. You see sponsored content and you're skeptical. So it's about, when you design the ad, it's about building legitimacy. And I think that's the same problem that AIOs have right now. Legitimacy, because what you'd see in the past, so what you're currently seeing right now is, especially due to the haphazard launch, I think my favorite one is about the best, you should be just smoking 6-pack of cigarettes a day if you're pregnant or something like that. I really enjoyed that one. But they don't have that legitimacy as of now, because something that's important to keep in mind is that Google's job is a librarian. They're not the books, right? They take you to the information, and now they're presenting themselves as the source. So at this point in time, they haven't built up that credibility. So it could change in the future. I think that's the key thing, is the accuracy of how much it consistently stays. Because at the end of the day, from a customer journey perspective, it's just one less click, and that's all that can make the world of a difference. But I think it's just about how we see it consistently perform over the next year. If we see it, if we see it to, I think something that ChatGPT has begun to do is list their sources, so that it doesn't look like they're just Google just putting an answer out of nowhere. And I think that's something that's going to be more and more and more important to revolutionize the way we sort of search for things. It's going to go from being, oh, have you checked out this website too? Here's a summary, and here's where you can get more information from.
Yeah. Anything to add on this side?
Not a huge amount. I've actually had some really good use out of some of the AIOs that we've seen recently. But there's that added caveat of having to qualify the information again, and checking if it's legit. One analogy I have: I'm a mead maker. I brew mead. It's like wine essentially. And I was looking for something to help clear the wine, get rid of the sediment, and I got an AI overview. And it told me to use this bentonite clay, and I click through and I see if this is legit and if this actually works. And it turns out if I used that, it would have ruined the whole batch because of the nature of the fruit that I used, right? So it spent me longer to validate that bit of information to figure out that actually this would ruin things. And if I didn't do that, I would have ruined my whole batch. So in terms of legitimacy, it still needs validation. And then it comes to that idea of okay, if there is no legitimacy, how do we get this? And I think Google they think the answer is obviously look at moderated communities, Reddit, Quora, etc., where we have users saying, yeah, no, this dude is right, this has worked for me. So I think the more they integrate that into the AIOs, the more success they may have in the future, really.
I'd like to talk about mead. What are we doing talking about AI? Let's talk about mead. But yeah, I think from my perspective, I've not brewed any wine yet recently. But when I'm finding general things on search, I tend to find that they're very similar to featured snippets. like really, really similar to featured snippets. Very often they duplicate on top of featured snippets. And I think they're similar to featured snippets in that featured snippets have always been powered by machine learning. They've always had a generative element to them. It's been low level, but it's been a generative element. So for instance, if you had a blog and it was listed as 1, 2, 3, 4 ways to make mead or something, then sometimes if you got a featured snippet for that, it would show up with bullet points for ways to make mead, for instance. If they had a table and it had like 3 different, conversions for cake or something like that, then, and let's say the table was across 3 tabs, then when you asked about your cake, it would show you 1 section from the tab. So featured snippets have always had that. Similarly, featured snippets would show images from multiple different websites, and then they'd show a paragraph from another website. So they're very, very similar to me as a user. From featured snippets. And I think that the way that we think about them, about the zero click or about the CTR or about the visibility should be very similar to the way we approach featured snippets as well. Going forward, they may very well evolve to be more like what we see on Copilot. And Copilot has an element where if you go to Bing and you use Copilot, what will happen is they will generate an answer, and then you have the option to discuss the answer with them forward. That I think will be really, really interesting. So like when you were saying that clay would ruin the batch, you could go back to the AI overview and go, actually, that's terrible information. Why did you say that? And they go, oh, my bad. Try this other thing instead. And I think that when we get into that area, which is almost certainly going to happen because Google very often copies Bing's homework, we will see some differentiation. But at the moment, it's giving featured snippet.
Yeah, and to that point, like there are many searches that I do, say like a celebrity's net worth or when was Rome built or whatever. Like I don't need to read a book on this. I just want to know, like, how much is Bill Gates bringing home? So at the end of the day, like there is a place for AIOs, and it's important to just recognize that as a brand. And speaking of brand, in my opinion, this is really where SEO needs to lean in. We need to buddy up with our brand strategists and our brand managers because that is what is ultimately going to drive the click these days. It's probably not going to be the actual content anymore, but rather like when someone sees and recognizes your brand in AIO, they know they can trust it a bit more. But all of that work is done in conjunction with SEO, but not only SEO. Mm-hmm. So next, as we think about this, in what ways do you think AI search will replace traditional search? Crystal, you mentioned conversational queries. I 100% agree. When I think of things like travel itineraries or how-to videos, I see a much more meaningful world of AI search than traditional search. So I don't have to go read 5 different websites on how to hang a door. Yeah. What other ways do you see?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned that PricewaterhouseCooper report. I highly recommend that you read it. But where they think the trend is going to become super personalized. And this is what we see, coming from a SaaS background, this is what we see in what Google is talking about with the evolution of this product. And in the way that Bing are also talking about the evolution of their Copilot product. So they're like, get Copilot, and it will help you with your Excel sheets, and it will help you write your documents, and help you write your emails, and help you do this, that, and the other. And they're also, like, when we're in the UK here, but in America, they're doing advertisements, like TV advertisements about, like, I'm doing AI, Google Gemini is my best friend, and it's helping me do this, that, and the other. And so it's going to be very, very personalized. Further, when you're talking about, when you're looking at generative search, or when you put in a generative query, the search bar is much, much bigger, right? So I think if you go to Bing, it's something like it's like 2,000 characters or something like that. And a lot of times, I use Copilot a lot, and the thing that's biggest as far as from a UX point of view is the microphone. Right? So you talk into the microphone and go, oh my God, I've been trying to get this cake to rise, and I've done it 3 times and it's not working, and I tried this, and this. And they'll go, you should try this. And so that personalized search is going to overlap with a lot of the signals that you're giving to the AI assistants that you use, that your users are giving to the AI assistants that you use. And from the brand point, that means that when users are interacting with your brand in lots of different touch points on social or with influencers or with other things, then it's more likely to filter into their more personalized search when they get into the sort of high-level assistant area. So like, for instance, if you have an Alexa, then it's very often connected to your Amazon account, and you can say, hey, I need more Cheetos, or hey, I need more, Doritos or whatever. And they know they don't have to pick a shop. They'll just send it from Amazon because it's connected to your Amazon. So similarly, if they know that your chosen brand is this, or your chosen, community that you go to is that, then when you ask for information, they're more likely to send it to you from the brands that you connect with more often. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting.
Fantastic input. I would love to turn it over to the audience. Any questions on search engines, AI integration, and yeah. Oh, Ruth's running up. Amazing. Yeah, front row. Thank you.
So I've probably been for Omar, because of your paid search background, but anyone feel free else to answer. But just in terms of the AIOs, I don't know if you have any views on how they can sort of coexist with paid search. In a way, I guess AIOs are leading for more zero-click search and more curated content. But in a way, I guess the e-commerce side of things is a little bit different. So I don't know if you've had any views in terms of how both of them can coexist rather than one kind of fight over the other.
Yeah, I think just on this point, I think at the moment, commerce is not inbuilt in Google. So there's two separate spaces for it. I think there's a very fair, the only exception I can think about is Yandex in Russia, where you buy directly from the search engine. But from what we traditionally use paid search as the more bottom funnel, I don't think it's going to impact that too much. I think from what I've sort of seen myself, it's AIOs tend to be more upper funnel. They tend to be more query related. They tend to be about gathering data rather than actually making that purchase. So unless your search strategy involves an upper funnel level, for example, I worked on a client that had about incontinence, lots of fun, by the way, but they had a very robust upper funnel strategy about sort of answering different questions. I think that's where you may find a little bit of conflict. But at the same time, even if you're built to run that strategy, you have to build the content out. And if you're building out the content, and eventually if Google is going to follow the route that ChatGPT does, where they sort of begin to link and you become an authority on the source, then that's, it does the same job anyway. So maybe you're not necessarily, going to see the results from a paid search direct click perspective. But at the end of the day, I think, to summarize my answer, from a commerce perspective, I think that's going to very much remain on site, because that's just the way the internet is built in our world. While the upper funnel stuff, where we don't traditionally see a lot of paid search activity, even just the work required to build out that paid search activity is going to feed dividends into search AI.
Thank you.
Just to jump on quickly, if you go to Bing's Copilot, when you click on the search links for the responses, they very often include a paid element in them as well. So it's worth looking at multiple generative search engines to get an idea of the kinds of trends that we'll see going forward as well.
Fantastic point. There's another question, row 2.
Great, thanks. So the one thing that I wanted to ask is that how are you looking for AIOs and SERPs? One thing that I've noticed is that the consistency of measurement across different tools is actually really difficult. And as we kind of mentioned as well, with SERPs becoming more personalized, we're going to end up obviously having different sources of very similar queries as well. So I just wanted to kind of ask and hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of differences, right? I've used SEMrush with some good luck in the past. It just depends on what's available to my clients and what I think is going to be useful. I think it'd be great if we could see some form of a meta-analysis of this, essentially, where we've got people doing We take the independent variable being one website or one query or whatever it is, something that doesn't change, and we use that across as many tools, as many platforms as possible, and see which one is giving us the most effective information. But I think the difficulty there, and again, I've said this about 3 times already, is the validation of that, right? If tools are telling you different things, which one is correct? And it's unfortunately quite manual, but it's just going into that SERP, right? Typing that query into the box and seeing what it looks like, which I think you can never underestimate, right? I love just jumping into that sandbox and seeing what it looks like live, and especially if you're not doing things in bulk. So yeah, really, really difficult one to figure out right now, but I'd definitely like to look into it a bit more. And hey, if anybody's doing these kind of studies, hit me up, because I'd love to look into it.
Yeah, just to jump in here. So SEO Clarity is an absolutely fantastic tool. They have recently released an AIO overview, that AIO overview, there we go, that I highly recommend, where it talks about how, over 90% of the results are for informational queries, not lower bottom of funnel queries, etc. Anyway, all that to say, I think KPIs are going to change. We're no longer going to be looking at keyword rankings, but we're going to be looking at, say, like pixel width on the page. How much is your brand showing for above the fold? Instead of, or to expand on that, it's going to be like a share of voice calculation. How much of the SERP visibility are you ultimately owning? And in my mind, even in a personalized approach, shifting to those types of KPIs will be really important. The very last thing I'll say, to Crystal's point, there are still many AI search engines that don't even link out quite yet. And so keeping a pulse on how is your branded search, improving, declining, et cetera, because if someone sees a result in, say, Perplexity and they can't click through, they're going to go to Google, type in that brand or that product, and then click through. And I know many SEOs are really only focused on non-brand. And in this new world, I think shifting to that more holistic view of brand and non-brand is going to be very, very important. Yeah, absolutely. Up here.
I just wanted to ask you, because at the start, and I know we talked about the kind of influx and the criticism that AI overviews had when they first launched both in the US and in the UK. I believe that the number went from like 15% of like results showing AI overview down to 7 recently based on recent studies. Do you feel like Google rushed into this? And if so, do you think that when they get the rhythm right, we might actually see more results like being taken again and then having that SERP real estate pushed down? Like, what's your views as a panel?
Just to quickly, again, maybe Google rushed into it because that's a higher return on investment than 5 years of trying to figure it out without going live, right? So I feel like this is a thing that Google does. They put stuff out, it doesn't work, it's broken, and then they fix it in situ live. So I feel like that's probably more what we've seen in this case, but it depends, really. It depends who you ask, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we're going to see it evolve very quickly. And I think that going back to the previous question, I think that this is one of the reasons why, like, unfortunately, manual review is going to be really, really useful. And there are some tools. I think ZipTie is one that's dedicated specifically to monitoring AI overviews. And I think it's worth, even if you don't buy the tool, it's worth following the blog to see the changes that are happening there, because I think we're going to see a lot of changes over this particular tool in the next little while. I think for at one point they had loads and loads of medical things in it, and then they sort of dialed that back, and they might change things around as they go. So I think that it's worth, particularly for your key SERPs, to monitor those regularly and check them, I don't know, at least weekly, to see if there's any changes to how the AI overview is rendering, changing, et cetera.
So just on this point, I think just to answer the question as directly as possible, yes, they 100% rushed into it, because for the first time in a long time, Google's being challenged. It's the first time where Google is on the back foot by its competitor, which is Microsoft. And we saw that a little bit with TikTok when TikTok searches were coming out. I remember when those statistics were coming out about TikTok being how people would search for something or like learn about information. I started seeing ads about Googling. And that to me is like seeing an ad about breathing. Like it's something that's so inbuilt in our day to day. So there is definitely like an element of, and especially as a corporation, see, we can do it too. So I definitely think it was a bit rushed. But like as echoed, I just want to echo everything that my other panelists said earlier. And we see this a lot with the paid side. They will release something. It's not that great, but over time they take feedback and they'll improve it. And that's something that Google's very good at doing. So yeah.
To round this out, yes, AIOs will increase in visibility. We saw that with almost every other SERP feature that's come out. Featured snippets, it was the same thing. It started as 2%, then a year later it was 7%. Now, before AIOs, the featured snippets were everywhere. The other thing I will say here is I believe that Google was caught on its back foot, and there's a fundamental, speaking of which technology is the right to use, there was a fundamental misunderstanding of an LLM is not an information retrieval tool. It is a generative tool. And it was being used devoid of this algorithm that it's been fine-tuned and tweaked for decades as a standard LLM. And those were the results that we initially saw within SGE and AIOs. And now what we're seeing is over 99% of the AIOs are pulled from the top 10 results within Google. So they've now married their LLM and their usual search algorithm. And that's how it should have been built from the very beginning. But I think it was just, it's a new technology. No one really knew, like, what does this look like in the search engine space? And to Omar's point, they were caught on their back foot and they had to put something out. It is still surprising to me, though, that they had a year to test SGE and AIO's launch, and it was still such a flop. But it will improve. It will get better. I think it's just where we're at in terms of like what tech do we use for any of these use cases. Amazing. Awesome. Let's move on to discussion point 3. AI tools and use cases. What are your favorite AI tools? What's missing today? I'm honestly most interested to start with Crystal, because as we know, Wix has launched a ton of AI tools. So yeah, what is your view?
So yeah, in Wix Studio, we have AI all over the place. We have things to help you generate content. I put down we had a little sheet for this, and I recently put down we have an IDE, so a coding framework, and we have a code debugging tool built in that. And not only does it help you generate code, but if you are having trouble with your code, it will help you troubleshoot it. And if you are somebody who has patchy JavaScript skills, then this is going to be incredibly, incredibly useful. So I've used it for a number of things. I find it really, 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 really helpful, and I love it. I also recently discovered that we have loads of photo generation and photo fixing things. So they recently launched something that allows you to extend an image. So I had an image that was landscape, and I needed white space portrait for my website that I was building. I put it in the website. I was like, oh, it's not big enough. And they just generated the extra thing. So I didn't have to go to a graphic designer. I didn't have to and it's like not a complicated thing. I just need more gray space, but the same color. And yeah, it pulled it through. It saved me, sending 7 emails, going back and forth with things. It also like cleared up my skin a little bit. I tidied up my hair, all sorts of things. So I was very, very pleased with this. But we've got loads of tools and we're building more all the time. I think that what I find being in our team is we're very very AI open, and we have like ChatGPT, we have open AI integrations built in across the tool set, because we find that users are way more engaged when they have these options. And I think that what I'm seeing as a user, generally speaking, is some of my favorite other tools have AI built into them. And I think that if you have a team that's like maybe AI skeptical or maybe not quite used to it, then then having them use the AI in the tools that they already know and love can be super, super useful. Another one that I use is Loom. And when you do a Loom video, they summarize all of the content and with AI. And thank you, my goodness, thank you so much. It saves you so much time, and that's really great. So I think that the AI that's in the tools that you have can save you so much time and get you so much more efficiency.
Yeah, I would love to hear from the paid perspective, because obviously Google has launched a ton of AI tools within paid search.
I think the way we use AI in search is a little bit different. It's just more features that we have that we just sort of feed into a bid strategy. So it's less of the generative AI aspect and more of the reinforced learning. So just giving more inputs for better outputs. Things like the extended broad match that was released around a year ago, matches like matches intent rather than matching to like what is similar to the keywords. But something that I've actually been a big fan of, and I've mentioned this earlier, is the Gemini integration into Google Ads itself. Because something that's really core about digital marketing fundamentally is accessibility compared to like offline media. So just not having, for example, we probably need 20 creatives. We don't have 20 good creatives. We could just recycle some of our existing ones and test and match to just edit it within the platform, and not having to, again, as Crystal mentioned earlier, just having that there rather than taking it somewhere else has been like a big game changer.
Amazing. I'm sure you all probably have loads of questions on AI tools and what tools we use. So I would love to turn it over to the audience. Who has questions around AI tools? Was I optimistic in thinking you all would have a lot of questions here?
Can I?
All right, one in the middle.
So I work in the financial industry, so very highly regulated, and one of the things that we struggle with is our stakeholders not really being on board with AI. One of the things that our website focuses mainly on is our customers and answering feedback and queries and stuff like that. Is there any tool that you'd recommend for that, or how to onboard our stakeholders into AI?
I think it's about that honest buy-in, right? I like to just show the stakeholder, hey, this is the tool, here's what it does right in front of your eyes, whether that's promoting your H2s to H1s in bulk, if it's adding a meta description where there isn't one based on what's on the page, right? Show the client, show the person that, hey, this is what it's doing. If they've got issues with the generative aspect of that, you can tone it down. You can make it a more custom package for that client while you work on educating them on, hey, this is actually useful for us. This hasn't got any risks because of X, Y, and Z. It's just all about like showing them in person. And I've done this before in the past, sort of at the end of 2022, started using an AI tool called Ali AI. You might see them around here as well. And all of my clients, every single one of the 12 that I had at the time, were completely against this tool being used. It was like, well, what's the point in you if there's this AI tool? And at the end of the day, I just showed them, like, here's what it's doing. Here's what I can do with it. Here's a few use cases. Showed them how much time it saved for me in terms of menial tasks, and then showed them, here's 6 hours that I can now put towards this task that wasn't even on the cards before, right? So it's showing them in real time in person, hey, this is making things faster, and here's how low the risk is with the task that we're doing, and just getting that buy-in with them, really.
Just on that point, I think you've mentioned something really interesting, which is that you work in a highly regulated industry. I think from my historic past and some of the accounts I've been on, a big part of that is brand safety. A big part of that is needing to control, it's not like a thing of I want to give up control or I'm not comfortable with it. They need to have that level of certainty about messaging or about this or about that. So I think it's always important to understand that, but also understand, for example, well, you don't need to rush into everything all at once. You can, for example, be selective with what you apply your AI in, and then see if you can scale that out. So, you can take baby steps as well. But I think it's just all about understanding, one, why they need the control, right? And working around that. I don't know why I said one. That was my only point.
I'd just like to bring in, so you've talked about risk, you talked about control, and I think that you need to meet that. So in the same way that you validate the AI responses, I think you also need to validate their feelings for regulation, right? Our team has an AI policy, and I know that there are multiple companies that have AI policies of this can be used for AI, this should not be used for AI. If you are using AI, it needs to be secure in this way, this way, and this way. If you are using it, you should not use it from your personal profile. You should use it from your work profile. You've all of those sorts of different things. So I think that if you have clients that are hesitant, then you need to set up the ground rules for them that we will use it for meta descriptions, for instance, which is publicly available. Anybody could crawl that at any time, and they're probably crawling it anyway, like the LLMs, et cetera. But for sensitive data, it will go through this process for this, and this, and those sorts of elements. And that, for instance, if you have any sort of legislative things, I've worked in finance, worked with finance clients as well, and you need to be able to check that the content is accurate from a legal standpoint or whatever. And those, what will happen, and what I had with my finance client was that we would go through, make the content, then we would send it to them for approval, and they would be bored, and then they wouldn't come back to us for another 6 or 8 months to approve the content, by which point the legislation had changed anyway, and we would have to rewrite it. Now, what you can do with an LLM is you can speed up that process, and you can potentially take some of the publicly available, legislative, regulatory documents, and you can set up tags to say, oh, this content needs to be updated because of this, or this content. So meet their regulation needs and show them that you've done the due diligence for the things they're worried about. Show them you have an AI policy and that you have an AI policy for them, and then I think you'll get more buy-in.
Any other questions? AI tools, use cases? One right there, yeah.
Are there any tools you'd recommend for content creation, SEO content creation, that go beyond just using ChatGPT with good prompts? I've not massively explored them, the kind of heavily paid ones, but we've done a lot of exploration with ChatGPT and prompt engineering. But is there things you recommend that go further than that?
Me personally, I have a journalism background, so I really love jumping in and getting the writing done, or jumping in and getting the planning done. So I've had some good luck with the basic stuff you've got out there, Gemini, ChatGPT in terms of the planning. But when it comes to writing the content itself, capturing that tone of voice, etc., I just don't think we're there yet unless you are paying out of your ears for a tool that has all of those features, right? I wouldn't say I've got experience using any of those, more pricey paid tools for content generation, but at the same time, we still have strong copywriters, we still have people who can still do this and probably do it a lot better than just an AI would, depending on the type of content, right? So I think I'd always just get a copywriter in using AI and using it as an assistive tool rather than just trying to outsource that whole aspect to an AI or to an LLM. We're just, in my opinion, not there yet. But that is a horizon that is slowly approaching, right? As soon as AI isn't assistive and it becomes more general, as in AGI, that's when things start to get a bit more Black Mirror and a bit scarier. But I feel like that's when those tools are going to be a lot more available to people. And I always think the technology is not useful until people have got it on their phones, right? Until everyone can do it. So we saw this with deepfakes. Only people who had loads of time in the industry and were working on VFX loads or had multi-million subscribers on YouTube for that genre, they're the only people that had the technology to do a decent deepfake or to de-age somebody and put them into a movie. Now people can do it literally on their phones. And it's the same with all of these other sort of these AI technologies and tools, right? I just don't think we're going to be there until everybody's got that technology in front of them.
My one word of caution here. So Jasper has been around for a long time. I know a lot of SEOs who love Jasper. It's built on the same exact LLM limitations and GPT that is being used to power any of the other ones. So really what makes it different is the UX, UI wrapper around that technology, which can be useful at scale, right? Like you can determine like, oh, I want you to be an accountant and I want you to have this persona and I want this level of professionalism that someone who is just going to ChatGPT probably wouldn't think of off the top of their head to fine tune and tweak. So it can lead to better prompts, but the underlying technology is the same as anything else. And that technology has been around since 2018 when the first GPT was launched. So I know SEOs like Jasper for that perspective, but it's important to know that foundationally, they're all generally the same.
I think in terms of like prompts or whatever, I think that spend time investing in your training set. Like create a custom training set that's custom to your project, your client, your tone of voice, whatever it is. If you have a custom training set and make your own custom GPTs, the people that I know that are doing amazing things with AI and AI content creation are making their own custom GPTs. We were just talking about amongst ourselves about how Google's launched Notebook LM, and that one's I guess that's a tool. Basically, you can upload tons and tons of documents, and it essentially becomes a GPT just for whatever it is you've given them. So for instance, if you had a finance client, you could upload all of their documentation, every PDF they've ever done, every report they've ever published, every blog they've ever written, everything. And then you would be able to generate content, ask questions, et cetera from that. I also think that people forget that like Google, like the transcription, like you could do AI transcription. That I think is an amazing AI tool. So if you have a subject matter expert and you're trying to get EEAT onto a website, maybe they don't have like 7 hours to write a blog, but maybe they've got 20 minutes to talk to you. You can transcribe all of that. You can use an LLM to help you tidy it into an article. You can move forward with something that's super custom and has the human element and has lots of great value for users. So
amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Well, this has been an absolutely incredible panel. Thank you so much to all of the panelists who joined. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.